Hey guys, today I've got a really short video that discusses the in and out settings on the Boss GX10. So first of all, let's look at the input settings. Now you can see that I've set this first one up to say EVH Black. Now this represents my black Eddie Van Halen Wolfgang guitar. Now the input sensitivity is basically the sensitivity of how much gain is output from the guitar itself. And you can monitor this by the input meter at the top screen here. Now if I just strum, you can see that as I'm strumming, and you want to strum as basically hard as you're ever going to strum. And you want it so that it's not hitting the red. Now you can see that I've got the input sensitivity set to plus 2 dB. But if I strum really hard, then you can see that it actually tips the red in the meter, which may indicate that the output of the guitar is a little bit too loud. So I want to just adjust the sensitivity down so it's not hitting that red. And that's it. So now it's just hitting the yellow, which is a very healthy setting. Now the reason you want to set this accurately is certain effects such as the harmonizer, compressor will rely on the output level of the guitar coming into the GX10. So it's important to have a healthy level coming in so that it can accurately track the sound. So you've got up to 10 different presets here. So if we just dial down, you can see you can have 10 different guitars set up with different input sensitivities. Now you'll find that certain guitars may have higher output than others. Some may have passive pickups or active pickups. Active pickups are generally a much hotter signal, which means they're louder than a passive pickup. So if your guitar utilizes a battery to run the pickups, then that's generally an active pickup, and you'll find that you may need to adjust the pickup sensitivity. So basically you'll adjust the input and check the meter as you're strumming, make sure it's a good healthy signal, and then you can actually name it. So basically if we go to name edit, we can actually change the name of the guitar here. Now where this relates to in the actual preset itself, if we basically go to effects here and scroll to the end of the chain where we've got master, here's your input setting system here. And now you can change the actual guitar that you're using from the input setting. So at the moment I'm using that number 1, but if you've got different guitars, you can actually change the setting right here. And then you could duplicate the patch and just have it set up for a different guitar. So you could have a bank that utilizes patches for one guitar and then have a whole nother bank with input settings for a different guitar. Moving right along, we'll go back into the menu and in-out settings. And now we've got the output select. Now generally you're going to keep this at line phones. Now this setting presumes that you're running into a mixer or a DAW and you want the cleanest, flattest signal that you can get out of the GX10. Now for my purposes, I use this for every setting, even if I'm running into an amplifier. But you do have these other presets here that Boss has tried to approximate the EQ curve for these. Now some of these that run into an amp bypass the speaker simulation. So you can still turn off the speaker settings if you want, even though we're running the line phones. If we jump into the amp here and page across, you can see that I'm running a third-party cabinet response. But if I turn that all the way to the left, you can see that the speaker type is off now. So it doesn't matter what output setting you're using, you can always turn the speaker on or off regardless. Jumping out of there, back into the menu and in-out settings, and finally we have the global EQ. Now global EQ allows you to EQ the GX10 as a whole. So from time to time you may play venues and every acoustic space has its own inherent sound. Usually dependent on whether it has carpet flooring, it may have a lot of wood floorboards which may give a lot more of a brighter sound in general. So the global EQ allows you to apply an EQ to the GX10 and it will basically change the overall sound of the unit across the board. So basically every single preset within the Boss GX10 will be altered by that global EQ. Now you can turn the global EQ on or off. So generally you would just set up your presets and get them sounding how you want, and then when you go into a venue, rather than having to adjust every single preset to suit that venue, you can just basically turn on the global EQ and you can make your adjustments from the low gain, the high gain. You've got low mids and high mids as well. Now this last page on the global EQ is probably the most useful for me in terms of tailoring the sound to a venue. You can see you've got a low cut and a high cut and then an overall level. Now the level I don't usually mess with too much. However, you might go into a venue and you might find that your GX10 is sounding a little bit too bassy or too much bottom end. So you can actually tailor the low cut. So you can basically run it from 20 Hertz and just you can dial out how much bass or boominess is occurring within the sound as a whole. Similarly, the high cut will allow you to tailor the brightness or the top end of the signal. So it goes from flat to 12.5 kilohertz, which is essentially about as high as what the guitar range should be. And anything beyond 12.5 kilohertz is usually beyond the scope of what the human ear can actually perceive. So you can then dial this down. If you're finding that your sound is way too bright, you can just tailor this until it sounds right. And these are two very useful settings where you're just basically creating almost like a bracket between the bottom end and the top end, and then you can apply this as a whole to the entire GX10. And that's all we have today. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.